So my name is Beth Fisher Yoshida. I am the Program Director of the Masters of Science in Negotiation and Conflict Resolution at Columbia University. A little bit later, we'll put a link in the chat box. So if you wanted to access our website, you'll be free to do so. And as I mentioned before, we will be using the Q&A box. And I really do encourage you to write questions and comments in the Q&A box. And after our three presenters finish their presentation, we'll have an opportunity for engagement with you through the Q&A box. So if you have any questions or comments, that would be the time to place it in there. I'm very excited today to talk about linking conflict early warning and early action. As we know, once conflict happens, it breaks out and we're saying, I wish we would have known sooner that this was happening. Or after it happens, then we say, what were the signs that we missed to let us know something was happening? And in the world of psychology, I'm not a psychologist, but in the world of psychology, we talk about the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, yet we don't always pay attention to what we need to pay attention to really be early warned about what's happening. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the names of our three speakers today, and they're going to be talking about the Trust Network. And first, they'll say a little bit about themselves. They'll give a presentation. We'll have a chance then for the Q&A at the end. The first presenter will be Prabha Sankaranarayan, and she will say a little bit more about herself in a minute. And then we have Madhawa Palihapitia, and he will say something about himself. And we have DG Mawn. So if I can have the three presenters come in, and they can each say something about themselves, and then we'll move over to Prabha starting the flow of the presentation. So Prabha?
Thank you, Beth. Greetings. I am delighted and honored to have this opportunity to share with you what we will today about the Trust Network. My name is Prabha Sankaranarayan. I am the CEO of Mediators Beyond Borders International and one of the co-conveners of the Trust Network. Madhawa?
Hi, my name is Madhawa Palihapitia. I am one of the co-conveners of the Trust Network as well. And I do research and teaching at UMass Boston. Yeah, great to be here.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are. I'm DG Mawn. I'm the president of the National Association for Community Mediation, and I have the honor of representing centers throughout Canada and the United States.
All right, Kirsten, can we go to the next one? And the next one. So what is the Trust Network? What we will do today is give you a little bit of a background about it, share a little bit about our accomplishments and next steps, and then end hopefully with a call for you to become a part of it. So in 2020, at a moment of yet another moment of divisiveness, we as peace builders, mediators, conciliators, negotiators, reformers of community relationships, bridge builders, came together across the United States for the purpose of addressing what we saw as another moment of extraordinary vulnerability to violence in this country. In order, therefore, to address the increasingly toxic polarization, to diminish the divides, to create community cohesion, and thereby increase the security of this democracy, we created the Trust Network, which is a national cohesion and security infrastructure. Our vision was to have the capacity to address current and historical issues and apply the power of a wide range of democracy, governance, and peace-building tools, as well as legal organizations' capacities to in order to let people generate and self-determine solutions. This, we believe, was and remains the intent also of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So what do all of these ideas mean in action? So I'm going to turn this over to Madhawa at this time to give you some really current data and examples, which will, I think, then we'll come back to the structure of the network and a little bit more about its history. Madhawa? And the next one.
Great. Just a huge shout out to the Trust Network and the conflict early warning analytics team at UMass Boston. So we, one of the tools that we use to identify public sentiment is analysis of social media content. And you can, as you can see here, this relates to the Chaka convoy back in January, February. And so what we're seeing is kind of a mixed bag out there and a lot of political division. This is one of the analytical tools that we use to understand public sentiment and also to identify certain nuggets that might indicate to us any forthcoming political violence in the US. Next slide. And one of the things we've noticed recently is an increase in the activities of the Proud Boys and a change in tactics. This is going to come out in a early warning bulletin from the Trust Network soon. But we've seen a 70% growth in the Trust Network since 2020. So between 2020 and 2021, a 70% growth in the Proud Boys, and they have changed their tactics from working at the national level to identifying local issues that they can leverage to create political violence at the local level. So we're expecting them to splinter or to be known locally under different names and get involved in local issues like, you know, school board disputes, etc. This augurs for the Trust Network's method of early warning, but also early response, using local actors and local capacities for peace, which BG will obviously talk about shortly. Next one. And we're also seeing a general increase in the number of hate crimes, terror plots, riots, and other violent, politically motivated protests throughout the US, particularly in the Northeast and the Southeast, as well as in the Northwest and the Southwest, and a little bit, in the Midwest region. A lot of this is concentrated along the two coastal areas, and this is based on several data sets: the UMD terrorism database, FBI hate crimes database, SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center, ADL, and ACLEC, the Armed Conflict Database, and also other data that we've been collecting since 2020 through crowdsourcing. So we see a significant increase, and this is another tool that we use, which is geospatial data analysis to indicate the types of violence, riots occurring, etc. Next one. Over to you.
Thank you. So the reason we wanted to start with a very current geospatial data analysis is to highlight how much of what we came together to form in September, October of 2020 remains current, present, and dynamic. There is absolutely no question that what we came together to create with the Trust Network was not just to prevent election-related violence in 2020, but recognizing that we needed to build a capacity that is unique to the United States and build it based on both local practice and knowledge, as well as by integrating international expertise. So, I think it's important to say that Americans are used to thinking that widespread violence on the street happens elsewhere. We are a country at peace, is what we keep hearing. And yet, if you look at the indicators of positive peace, there are many signs to indicate why we must create this kind of a network. So two key things that caution us otherwise about the status here. In addition to the low level of public trust in the federal government, America's steady decline in the Global Peace Index and the Department of Homeland Security's identification of white extremist groups as the greatest threat to the homeland really clearly indicate why. And as you saw in Madhwa's geospatial analysis, the widest threat right now is with the Proud Boys shifting from a national strategy to a local strategy. And so how we formed was with the recognition that we need a coordinated, multi-sectoral approach. And if you show the next slide, Kirsten, I'll tell you which ones we are talking about. In order to build something that is unique to this context, this is an adaptation of Véronique Dudé's depiction of conflict transformation. What we have done is to add another sector. What is unique about the US context is that there are fairly robust activities within each of these sectors. So there are the democracy and governance, structural reform actors, people working on redistricting, financing in campaigns, voter registration, all of the kinds of structural reform that is necessary. There are a whole range of organizations working within those parameters. And then there are a whole range of civil resistance movement actors. Black Lives Matter, social racial justice, environmental justice, truth, racial healing, and transformation networks, lots of networks in that space. Then there are also the judicial and legal community, the ADL, SPCL, ACLU, all of those actors working within those parameters again. And then there are all of us as peace builders, mappers, analysts, designers, interveners. And it is our, the approach that we are taking is that, can you share the next one, Kirsten? That in order for us to actually work across all of these sectors is critical to building this national infrastructure for social cohesion and security. So we started in 2020. We can move pretty quickly through this and developed the next one, please. The first early warning platform. The three of us presenting here were at the outset a part of co-convening this network, Mediators Beyond Borders, while we work across the globe. Almost all of our work is at local capacity building. So we have been in partnership with NAFCM for a while, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity to come together with another area of expertise. So if you can go to the next one, this is what I mean by the braiding of these multiple sectors in order to build this infrastructure that we think is critical. So I had 4 circles in the previous one and only 3 here. And this is partly because we remain dynamic in our formulation. And we recognized as we started making the kinds of outreach that we needed to all of the actors, that we needed to reach out specifically to those in the legal sector also. So the next time we do this, you will see the 4th one there. This is very clearly for us the next one, please, Kristen. A transpartisan network. When we did the initial outreach, it was clearly with the goal that it needed to be transpartisan, that while many of the organizations might be perceived as one or the other, the commitment that people who came to the Trust Network made was to work across sectors. And so the next one, please, Kristen. All of this is a little bit of background, so I just wanted to make sure that we conveyed the transpartisan nature of this, the multi-sectoral nature of the Trust Network, before we get into more details of how exactly it works. So if we go to the next one, I am going to, at this point, turn it over to my colleague, DG, who will share how we bring it to life.
Thank you, Prabha, and thank you, Madhawa, and thank you everyone for being here. whether you are here as part of the Columbia University or more of a national university, if you hear this is also part of the Listen First initiative this week with America Talks. So if you found out about this workshop through that, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here. Hopefully, what you heard through Madhawa and with Prabha is each of you have a place to assist in the early warning, early response in your own communities. And the way to do that, and this is being taken from my partner Madhawa, is the 5 R's. It's getting the right information. What do people need to know? To the right people. Who are the people that need to know this in the right format? How do they receive information? What are the ways they receive them? At the right time. When are they most ready to take action, which is for the right action, so that we have an early warning response that facilitates positive peace and facilitates it in a way that the message of people, if it is a protest, is being heard and not being diminished because of action that may be experienced as disruptive. So it is always about, again, the right information to the right people in the right form at the right time for the right action. And how it works, you heard us talk about, and Prabha laid out beautifully, as did Madhawa, the national and international assistance and support in getting this network going, in managing it, and bringing decades of combined experience. What I have the pleasure to introduce you a little bit to is that local community. So there's only so much you can do sitting in your office if you're sitting there in New York City when your concern is about what's happening in Montana or Nebraska or Minneapolis or Los Angeles. How do we have that happen? If we can go to the next slide. What we're looking for, so do a checklist if you're listening in. Are you someone who's concerned about community cohesion building? If so, there's a seat at the table for you. If you're concerned about countering radicalization, there's a seat in the circle for you. If your work is democracy and governance, digital peace technology, environmental and health justice, media and messaging, there is a place. There is a need for you, for your eyes, for your talent. If your focus is mediation and restorative practices, prevention of violence, security sector transformation, truth, transformation, and reparations, we hear you, we see you, we need you in the circle. If you're focused on unarmed civilian protection or violence interruption, if you do any of those things listening in, if you are concerned about any of those things, please join the Trust Network. We have a role for each person individually to be part of our system, to report up what's going on and what's needed. And if you are in a community where there's like-minded people like you, and what I mean by that is the concerns on this list. I'm not talking about political positioning. I'm not talking about other types of aspects, but on this list, then think about, can we be a trust network convening center? And so I want to talk a little bit about that if we can go to the next slide. These are all our national groups that are supporting our convening centers. I mentioned Listen First, this is our week of national conversation. You see all these amazing partners. The list keeps growing, similar to our 3 steps. Our next one will have 4. We'll have more on this list as well as we move forward. So if we can go to the next slide. So what is this top-down, bottom-up early warning, early response system? It is about violence prevention that is robust only when it utilizes local knowledge, where local people and organizations participate in monitoring and violence interruption at the local level, assisted by clear, centralized mechanisms like the Trust Network. And an example to put out for you all, during the 2 years we've been around or so, there was a reporter that unfortunately witnessed a death in front of him, a very well-connected reporter. So he went on his social media pages, All his friends picked up the story. And we were told at the Trust Network, the early warning, early response, hey, there's something significant happening in this city. We need to keep our eyes on it. We need to reach out. So we did to our convening center in that city and said, what can we do? What national partners should we get involved? What is happening? And when we shared the story, they were flummoxed. And it was like, that's not a big issue. That's a reporter who is telling his personal story of witnessing a death. That is not going to impact our city. Well, what is going to impact your city? Well, here's a story no one's reporting, and they shared it with us that they had drop boxes, and there were people standing in front of the drop boxes, pre-any vaccinations, spitting and coughing at anyone who would come up to the drop box to put a ballot in, which had people not go up to the drop box. So people were not placing their sealed ballot in the drop box because what was going on. And they said, no one's paying attention to this. We're at the Trust Network said, well, we have SOS USA. We'll get some attention paid to this. We'll figure this out. And we were able to marshal these amazing national partners that were able to get the message into those city leaders for, as Madhawa said, the right information at the right time to the right people for the right action. And magically, within less than a day, police were making sure no one was standing in front of those drop boxes. City councils quickly passed ordinance how long you could loiter in front of these things. They just used their actual loitering laws that they had and decided to enforce them. And that which would have and could have caused a major violent disruption of people not being able to access the drop box was alleviated. That's what happens when we have the right people at the right time with the right message to take the right action, and we're able to combine our national partners' energies with what the local community was telling us. I point out that example because if we based just on the social media, we would have gone down the wrong path and not have prevented anything. And then when the community had an explosion, go, oh my goodness, how do we not know? Your early warning system knew. The next thing here, you see violence prevention is possible only when networks of trustworthy people respond in a coordinated way to local as well as national signs of politically motivated violence. The example I want to use here, and this is again through the Trust Network, through foundations that gave us some seed money. We were able to work with a community in a city, Minneapolis, which I'm sure is familiar with, and help them prior to the George Floyd murder trial to really strengthen their interconnectedness of their own convening around it. And in all the groups that were focused on this, who do they trust? Remember, the right people at the right time. Who do they trust? And so when the judge did what he did, which any lawyer would have told you he can't do, if a higher court rules you must do X, you must do X. When the news media went out and made this into something it wasn't, these trusted networks were able to get the message out to their people. Here's what's going on. Here's why we think the judge is doing what he's doing. We don't know it for certain, but we don't want to become the story. We want the judge's action to stay the story. And that's what ended up happening. And so when the news media said, we are surprised there's no violence, we're surprised there's no protest, you now know the secret sauce. There was no protest because the Trust Network was able to provide some incentive funding to our local center to bring people together months in advance to really have that network in place. So when something happened, the right people at the right time with the right message could take the right action. I'm missing one of your rights, Madhawa, I'm sorry. And they're able to do it. And I want to say how it sustains itself. When the same protest occurred with the no-knock warrant, and people took to the street as they have the right and should do, that network went into play again. And again, you had huge protests, impacted the city, impacted the county. They made immediate changes, and the protesters didn't become the story. These are examples of your trust network in play. I have dozens and dozens and dozens more but I know we have a time limit. So I'm going to pass this back to my partner, Madhawa, who's going to talk a bit about what is still going on in our country. Thank you.
Thanks, DG. So yeah, this civic infrastructure that DG talked about is right in the middle of things, and the ones, the stars, the black stars on the left-hand side, those are the convening centers. Obviously, we also have national partners, which is not on the map, but these local community mediation centers, restorative justice, and other centers, they're right there in the community. As you can see in the next map, with the convening centers and the type of protest, for example, they're there in the community. So they're community members, they have local knowledge, they have local connections, they have developed trust at the local level, they have local operational capacities, and the trust network is in the process of further training, providing resources, providing them with early warning signals, etc. So this is that infrastructure that we built. And for folks who are familiar with early warning, early response, early warning is only as good as the early response. We call it the warning to response gap. In a lot of early warning systems, you have great information ahead of time. We saw this in, prior to genocides, for example, in Rwanda, but there was no one to take action. So, and it's a very tedious task of building these mechanisms. And in this third generation of community-based early warning system, we are trying to build it right into these communities, and we have been successful with that, which is sort of the best way to address the warning to response gap. Next slide. And the other thing that we've done is we've triangulated through geospatial data analysis, statistical analysis, monitoring social media information, list of 26 hotspots, cities these are, throughout the country. And we are this is sort of a heat map of one level of analysis. As you can see, a lot of concentration up in the northeast, some in the southeast and southwest, and so on. And we're going to come up, we're going to publicize this list pretty soon and come up with a strategy, not just for the trust network and its partners, but broadly speaking, so that mayors and other folks who can do something about it, the right people can do something about it at the right time, and organize these right actions, in the run up to the elections and beyond. So please expect that list to come out pretty soon, and it will be a comprehensive list. Next one. So another thing that we're doing is we're looking at events data at the city level. This is from Portland, and we are discovering trends in this in the data between peaceful and violent protests. For example, this analysis on the left, the line chart, you see there's a clear demarcation between when some of the peaceful protests end and when some of the violent protests end within a day. So around 7:30 p.m., we see that in Portland, these protests will tend to get violent. It's this kind of analysis that we're doing at the local level to really understand the cycles of violence in each city and how we can better prepare our responders on the ground. And this is sort of part and parcel of the trust network sort of analytics that we are bringing in. And we can also see peaceful and violent protests happening alongside each other. And one of the things we've noticed a classic example is Portland, but also Charlotte, where violent protesters and peaceful protesters weren't kept apart. They were brought together at one point, and there was violence. So there are these sort of early warning indicators in some of these cities in terms of events data and these cycles of violence that we are analyzing right now in order to give a better direction to the folks on the ground who need to know this stuff to prevent violence at the city level. Next one. So this is something that we are really excited about, and a really major tool that we are building now for the civic infrastructure. And this is basically a tool that will be in the hands of our early warning, early response mechanisms at the local level that will give them the ability to crowdsource information, to collect local information, days, months, weeks before these violent cycles begin. So starting very early on, looking at some of the indicators before the news media even picks it up. So one of the things that we do is, our databases, our media tend to pick up on things after the fact, or when things have escalated, or when the cycle has already begun. So with a tool like this, we hope to do several things. One is to empower local communities and give them ownership, and also give them a voice. This will be a place for them to, it's kind of like their bullhorn. People who are local level peace builders will have a bullhorn through this, will have the capacity to participate in early warning, early response, and for that information to feed into the analysis and coordination, and to formulate early response action. So this portal will help us do geospatial data analysis, events data analysis, even things like artificial intelligence, looking at big data and some of the trends in the data, to dashboarding, etc. This is something that we are excited about and in the process of developing. So this will be sort of the next generation of early warning system and its analytical platform. Next one. All right,
I'm just inviting you again. I began with this invitation. We began this invitation. Are you concerned with the rise of politically motivated violence in the U.S.? Would you like to do something about it? Our hope is, since you've decided to share your lunch with us on a Thursday afternoon here in late April. It's beautiful where I am. Hopefully it's beautiful where you are. And you're sharing that, we're hoping, because you want to know and you want to learn. I did see the question in the Q&A. Resolution Virginia is our trust network for the entire Commonwealth of Virginia. So I believe they're working with the attorneys there. I'm not sure with that particular group, but hopefully we'll save that question and we can check it out. We have other states, Georgia, Nebraska, both are statewide trust networks. We have, as the map showed, many communities throughout the country. So join the trust network. If you find out we don't have a convening center in your community and you are one of those hotspots that Madhawa went over, and again, we're going to be releasing a full release in the next 2 weeks, and you see you're in a hotspot, please, we need you. And if we don't have a convening center there, we need you to help us start one. If we do, then please join it. And everyone has a place at this moment to help us reduce violence, potential violence in our community. You can do it by being a media monitor. So if you find yourself living on social media, yay, you can tell us what's going on in your community and send it up to us. You can be a field monitor. If you're one of those folks who get around town and observe things and see what's going on, like the folks in my first story that said, here's your problem, it's the drop boxes, notify us. We have national networks as well as local networks. We can help, we can assist. If you're trained in de-escalation, please, we need you as interveners. It is actually, I'm an intervener. It is not as horrific as it may appear. It's actually enjoyable to have people really take a breath and not do something that they may regret for the rest of their lifetime here. If you're a communicator, if you're someone who can love telling stories, do videos, do snapshots, we need you. We need to get the message out there to people that we have this possibility of hope and this possibility of continuing forward with preserving our democracy. If you're grant writers, you know we need you, because we're living on startup funding and there's lots of work to be done both nationally and locally. If you're an organizational partner, if you're representative of a national group, let us know. Join the network. We want you. We need you. So hopefully no one will leave this webinar saying, I don't have a place in this. You do. You do. Contact us. We'll talk. We'll find the right place for you at the right time for your voice to create the right message for the right action, both nationally or locally. And we can move to the next slide. And I'm going to turn over to my partner, Prabha, to close out this part of our session.
There really isn't a whole lot more to add. And I think to simply bring to a bigger picture all of what Madhawa and DG have been sharing, I would ask Kirsten if we can go to the next slide. As we said, as practitioners, what we recognize is that this moment in this country's history is new in that it is in this moment. Some of the underlying issues are as old as this nation is. And they continue to impact the conflict dynamics in this country. So keeping all of that in mind, please know that our creation of this network has the goal of addressing issues at all of these levels that we can address at the root cause level and at various stages of escalation as we are seeing today. So whether it's growing tension that, as DG described in a de-escalation example, we can intervene with, or in an interruption, if it has escalated to the point that we have not been able to do anything prior to it. Sometimes that happens. So the range of people and organizations, along with a recognition of all the different stages at which we can respond, are what we hope to accomplish. So if you are a member of your community, as you all are, there is a role for you to play. And with that, I encourage you to send an email to info@the-Trust Network. I'm happy to put mine and ours. I promise you that the response from info will be faster than the response from me. So we have two amazing co-managers because of the resources we have who are paying attention to convening this community of responders on a Slack channel where there's ongoing monitoring and continuous response loops. So thank you again. We're open to questions. Beth, take it away.
Thank you so much, everybody, for your presentation. And I encourage members of the audience to please feel free to send us your questions. We have a couple of them here. I think one of the strong messages you were saying is that no role is too big. Everybody can do something in some way to be effective. And that really does, for lack of a better term, take a village. It takes everybody to even make the most, what seems minor observation of something going on to make a difference. So the first question is, the elephant in the room seems to be the issue of cognitive dissonance. Do we not need to address this? Not sure how, so that we're not just addressing the symptom and not the root cause. You did mention quite a few times about root causes, and here's a challenge about not just the symptom, although the symptom is what we notice. So anybody want to take that away with a cognitive dissonance?
I would like to just jump in and then turn over to my partners that because the folks I represent, the United States has a structure since 1964 with these communication centers. And we were created to help people address the root causes. So we don't come in with, I'm brilliant and I'm going to tell you how to do this. We cultivate local individuals to create the space for local individuals to really process through what are the facilitators of this? What is causing this? And we have done experimentation with that. This year, we're looking at, through JAMS funding, we're looking at systemic issues. So why is housing the way it is? Why is my county treat certain parts of the county the way they do? Why is my population, where I'm a minority majority city, but there's only so far I can rise up with any city power? So we are looking at those things. And in the year coming up, we're looking at reimagining safety, which clearly will get us to what are the root causes of these issues. So that's another, it's an excellent point, an excellent question. That's one of the reasons why it's such a great merge with the trust network, because while we're doing that, we're also through the centers also looking at how do we address what is in front of us immediate, because you need to do both. You can't just address the immediate, because what facilitated that, it'll just pop up in another place. And you can't just focus on, okay, we knew what facilitated it, because the house is still burning. We need to make sure we put the fire out. So what the trust network is really doing is both at simultaneously. And so I love the question, and I wanted to make sure I stress that. And I don't do it. I represent the 350 centers that do it and do it every day.
The only thing I will add to that, Beth, is for those who have worked both in this country and outside, there is a very unique feature in this country, which comes out of the Civil Rights Act. It is they used to be called justice centers in some parts of the country and were called community boards in other parts of the country. What they are is this, what it is this enormous network of community mediation centers. And they look different in different communities, address different issues in different communities. And what I go around the world sharing is what capacity they have. They are credible conveners at the local level. So they have a capacity to address some of these issues that Dr. Williams has raised because they are critical. So I will just stop there. Thank you.
Mads, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I'll add a little more to sort of the operational, what we call operational prevention in early warning, and which is sort of the direct violence, and then the structural prevention, which is sort of the root causes. And these are very important things. And one of the things we've noticed is even if you look at the January 6th attackers and their backgrounds, and we're seeing it now even in this data, a lot of the violence seems to be concentrated in high income blue or purple states or counties. So this throws into question, what are we really looking at? And we need to start paying more attention to some of the underlying dynamics and root causes. On top of that, we're seeing, in a place like Boston, where I live and work, and huge polarizations, huge income inequality, the middle class being hollowed out, and a corresponding increase in anti-Semitism, etc., etc. So hate crimes, hate groups, etc. Things that we haven't been accustomed to seeing. So something's going on at that sort of root cause level that we need everybody, all hands on deck, to try and figure out and try and address, as well as the more operational prevention, the direct violence prevention. And the key to all of these things is the top to bottom, bottom up, the infrastructure of local groups and individuals, working with national groups and individuals, peace building organizations, legal community, academics, all kinds of people that we have brought into the trust network. So, this might not be the silver bullet, but it's the best thing we've got. And the message here is that the civil society needs to participate. We cannot always rely on government or government agencies or law enforcement agencies to act. As you saw, if you try to rely exclusively on that, we are going to get January 6th. Because when those mechanisms fail, there's really no fallback line. So we need to participate. We need to do this. There's no one else who's going to do it. So the onus is on the civil society actors and people with the expertise and the motivation. The motivation matters more than anything else to do this.
Thank you all. So one thing I wanted to highlight that I'm glad you all drew attention to is that it's a very local access through the community mediation centers. I think a lot of us had in mind that the community mediation centers were only if you had an issue and you mediated. But what you're saying here is there's a much broader array of services and possibilities, which is wonderful. So it makes it local access, which I think makes it more accessible for people. Okay, another question we have is really looking at the intersection of the systemic data collection that you've been doing, which is so impressive. And how does that work with the ad hoc asks you're making for people in local? If you see something, say something kind of mentality, mixing with your systemic data collection. How does that work together? How does that integrate?
So, it might seem like it's sort of expert intervention, but it really is not. And one of the reasons why we are building this civic technology and have developed this early warning, early response capacity through the convening centers and our national partners is that lay, quote unquote, lay information and lay participation is what will eventually drive this movement to success, to do the interruptions. But we are actually supporting them with all kinds of analytics and analytical tools. And we're also learning from them whenever someone does an intervention or reaches out to us about something. For example, in the run-up to the elections, there was a lot of that going on in Portland. Peaceful protesters, violent protesters, people moving in from outside of these cities who were tactically, well equipped. These caravans of large trucks. So we were working a lot with that. So that's really where the local knowledge and the local people or the lay expertise kind of takes over eventually. But at this point in time, a lot of our analytics is trying to look at some of the trends and giving people a heads up that this is what we're seeing globally in terms of what people are tweeting, what people are talking about online, how these groups are changing their tactics, etc., so that we are giving them a heads up. But eventually, when trouble starts, it's the local people who lead it, and we support it. So that's kind of the relationship, and there aren't any sort of demarcations or boundaries really, because we are really trying to learn from them. And that infrastructure that we are building, that will really be the sort of the tool where they will have the bullhorn.
Thank you.
The one piece that I was thinking, Madhawa, is something we talk about a lot is also, this is very early stages. We are now responding to the dynamics dynamic factors while recognizing the structural underlying issues. A truly mature system would combine the structural as well as the dynamic. And that is where we need to be going. So those of you who have worked on these systems in other parts of the world know that things like the divide, income divide, access to services divide, healthcare divide, all of those factors contribute to the dynamics that are rumbling and surfacing in explosive events, right? But if we don't combine all of that, it will not be as robust. So I think over time, our hope is really to build a system that combines the dynamic as well as the structural.
Great. And it just reminds me of the whole movement over the years towards crowdsourcing of everything, right? So crowdsourcing of information, which really feeds into the sophisticated analysis that you're doing as well. So it's going back to my takes a village. And this is all happening in the context of the United States, where we have a democracy, and how do we support democracy? Because our next question is about somebody from Congo and saying, it's like, how can the Trust Network help people be heard? Because for him and other, I think him, maybe it's a woman, I don't know, sorry, and other Congolese, they hear democracy, but they've never experienced it. So any messages you can give about how to spread this kind of network to a broader context or to other kinds of situations that are not characteristic of US type democracy?
Okay.
Maybe your MBBI background will help with that.
That's what I was thinking. This one is really designed for the United States. We were very specific. And it is designed with a global community sharing of knowledge and expertise. So I would say it's, gone are the times when any one group can sit up somewhere and say, oh, we are the experts, we'll tell you what to do. We know as peace builders that doesn't work. I don't know who is doing that kind of work anymore. It has to be co-created. It has to be collaborative. There is local knowledge and wisdom. At the same time, there needs to be that kind of integration of knowledge and wisdom across the globe. So I would welcome Blaise to join any of our presentations, any of our meetings, share what's going on, but also know that we are happy to refer to you to international actors who are working on these kinds of issues in the DRC, in East Africa, and in West Africa. You know, our first early warning system comes out of Kenya. Ushahidi is the platform that was developed in Kenya. And I am very proud to say that our openness to learning allows us to create processes in this country that have their roots in other parts of the world. And I know Madhawa has worked on early warning systems in Sri Lanka, and he can speak about how they created theirs and what advice you might have for the Congo.
Sure, and I worked in Nigeria as well, advised on a few African projects as well. This system, so if you look at what we call effective practices, some people call it best practice, or there's really nothing best, but certain models have certain effective practices, and we've certainly transferred some of those effective practices from our international work into what we are doing here in the US. And what's transferable back is the idea that democracy is a fragile thing. As we saw on January 6th, our government came under attack. And this is one of the largest democracies in the world, the most powerful government in the world. And we saw how our government came under attack. So I think the thread that runs through a lot of these things, whether you're Congolese or American or whoever, is that democracy is something that we need to actively protect, irrespective of where you live. And it needs community participation. And the thing that can truly upset democracy is political violence. And that's the point here. And wherever we see political violence, we need to get organized and address political violence. Because if it's unaddressed and it keeps growing, then it becomes a direct threat to violence. And these are some of the signs that we're seeing. A lot of these actions we're monitoring have a political dimension to it, and can easily be used against our democracy. Same, in Congo, in Kenya, in Nigeria, it's the same thing. So, look at some of these effective practices and see what you can transfer. Already, a lot of these countries have had election violence monitoring initiatives, conflict early warning, violence prevention initiatives, and many peace building initiatives. But this one is unique in that we are trying to address political violence in order to preserve democracy. And that I'm sure is something that the Congolese would also find useful.
I guess just one thing, I think we have time for one more question. I just wanted to bring up, there was a question about the reliability, right? How do you validate that what people are informing you about is actually taking place and that there aren't other motives or intentions, I guess, behind that? So how do you test the accuracy of what people are reporting?
Yeah, that's the difference between the civic infrastructure, the data triangulation we're doing, plus the early warning, early response mechanism, which are formal mechanisms. We are, when we say crowdsourcing, we rely on people who we train. So we go through a series of trainings before we, allow them to interact, and they're coordinated through the local mechanisms. And the local people know exactly what's going on, or they have the best ability to find out what's going on. Now, this becomes a real issue, especially when there's, quote unquote, the fog of war, when things are unfolding pretty fast at the local level. So that's when we have to truly rely on local expertise and local knowledge. And that's why we're building these civic infrastructures at the local level, at the community level, the convening centers, the national partners, and triangulating a lot of this data through social media content, through geospatial data, statistical analysis, events data analysis, looking at some of the historical indicators. So we are trying to triangulate and find different points of data, but it's easier said than done. And this is something that, the accuracy of the data, like I said, in the fog of war, that's a huge problem. All we can do is, use these infrastructures, different analysis, analytical methods to try and get at what is really going on, get an accurate picture.
Yeah, so it sounds like I was going to ask, what are your hopes and aspirations? But I think I hear that embedded in something you just said, is that it's not only crowdsourcing in the grand scale, but it's really from reliable sources who've been trained and developed, which means I'm assuming then you wanted to spread that network to be greater and more present, so you can trust more accurate data. So we only have about 2 minutes left. So any closing remarks you'd like to make? I think we won't have a chance to address more questions.
I think, Beth, I wanted to at least begin to address the question about the participant who asked, looking at civil rights experts being concerned about, are we at a place of civil war, potential significant violence? My answer to that is Prabha, Madhawa, and I have been volunteers doing this for 2 years, spending significant weekends, evenings, hours, because we believe we are close to that precipice and we want to pull back. We want to step back from that and preserve the framework that we have. It's imperfect, absolutely, but preserve that framework. So I think by our actions, and that's why I want to lay out the actions, because people can say, oh, yes, but what are you doing about it? And we've committed a significant amount of our energy and our resources, because we do believe that our national partners have committed a significant amount of energy and resources. And all those convening centers doing that great work, they're doing it in addition to all the work they were doing anyway. We don't have the resources to support the effort that needs to happen. So I'm hoping by the laying out of our actions, you hear very clearly, we do believe it's that serious, and we are trying to help us take a breath and step back from the edge and figure out how do we continue co-creating together as one country.
Super. Well, thank you so much for everything. And I know we're going to have more conversations amongst ourselves anyway, if not with the broader audience. And just to say that this recording will be available on the NECR website. So let me see. So Sherston, we may, oh yeah, that's to everyone. Very good. So Sherston did put in the chat that there's a link to our website for events and so on. And we will have a link to this recording. And we look forward to more of you. Please getting in touch with us whenever you can. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for a wonderful presentation today. Goodbye, everybody.